Nicola Sturgeon has been blasted as pathetic for pushing for the cynical charade of a second Scottish independence referendum, according to a columnist. Tim Black argued that the First Minister was pushing for a never-ending campaign based on the threat of a referendum rather than an actual second vote. Mr. Black argued that there was no majority for independence in Scotland and that Scottish voters did not consider it a priority. He wrote, "Scottish government has announced plans for a second independence referendum, which it knows full well won't happen. This is something First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and her SNP cronies seem to have been doing on a near enough biannual basis since the British electorate voted to leave the EU in 2016. In 2017, riding a wave of Remainer resentment, Sturgeon announced plans for a so-called IndyRef2 to be held in 2018. When that inevitably didn't happen, she demanded an IndyRef2 for 2020, which, again, didn't happen. Now she has announced that IndyRef2 will take place on the 19th of October 2023. Under the conditions of the Scotland Act, which provides the constitutional underpinning of the Scottish Parliament, the question of the Union is a matter only the Westminster Parliament can rule on. So, if Westminster says no to IndyRef2 in October next year, which it doubtless will do, there is not much the Scottish Government can do about it. Sturgeon has asked the Supreme Court to rule whether it is in the Scottish Government's powers to hold a referendum, especially if it is merely consultative rather than executive. But the court will almost inevitably rule that Westminster ultimately has authority over Holyrood, which will put an end to that. And so we're back to where we were. Mr. Black also argued that should Ms. Sturgeon fail to gain Supreme Court authority for the vote she has scheduled to be held in October 2023, then the SNP leader will treat the next general election as a de facto referendum on independence. Sturgeon has already said, or rather admitted, that should the 2023 IndyRef2 not happen, she will treat the next general election as a de facto referendum on independence instead. Which is how the SNP treats every election anyway. The SNP is perfectly happy with continually calling for referendums that never come to pass. Because this is the dirty secret behind the party's posturing over IndyRef2, it really is not that into it. It is also because the threat of a referendum is, in a sense, more politically useful to the SNP than an actual referendum. The threat gives the SNP leverage over Westminster. The SNP's never-ending campaign may suit its own narrow party political objectives, but it is not doing British political life any favours.